Why? Because there's something built into us that wanted this always from the beginning. Maybe missed out on it, or even if we did have it, we would still be looking for it now. Why? Because it's the nature of growth. It's the nature of evolving. There was another question? Yeah, Susan.
Object constancy is disrupted in a major way, like, for example, I adopted my son when he was 2.5, before 3.
Yeah.
Will it ever be healed, or is this just going to be an ongoing issue to some degree?
According to the object relations theorists, it's supposed to be in place by age 3. But as long as there's a consistent mothering, it's easily made up for. It doesn't take much. It just takes enough of getting it across that I'm really there for you. It doesn't take much for something like this to kick in. The psyche wants this to happen, is looking for ways for this to happen. But for many of us, if you could look at this as a metaphor, it's almost as if in some way we are still working on this, still wanting to believe that others are really trustworthy. So I guess it would have to do with that. I mean, as long as he or she shows the possibility of trusting, that's the equivalent of having the object constancy. What is trusting? Trusting that the bond always remains, even in disruptions. So that's why Kohut says the disruption is such an important part of the therapeutic process. Because the way you respond to the disruption proves to the client that you're really there for him or her. That the alliance goes on even when there's an upset, either from you or from the client, bringing up transference in either direction. Yeah?
Have you noticed if the mirroring needs of the client are, as you say, they're grandiose? Yeah, they're huge.
Often, yeah.
And so, it's a huge pressure on the therapist to meet those needs. Have you noticed if group work provides maybe a better opportunity for multiple reflections, multiple mirroring, even from peers?
Mm-hmm. And the other advantage of the group, he's bringing up about the advantage of group therapy. The other advantage of the group is that it comforts and challenges. So they will mirror, but they will also say, get off it. And they can say that more easily than we can. It's something that they need to hear. We don't say it in so many words, but among peers, it somehow comes through a little more easily without such a big defensive structure being aroused by it. Another part of a stable sense of self is that you can receive feedback without becoming defensive. In other words, you're permeable. You can let things in. The only person who would be free to let something in is one who can trust that what's here is so secure that new things coming in won't harm it. Think of the beautiful statement by Virginia Woolf in one of her novels, The Waves. Moment by moment, things are losing their hardness. Even my body now lets the light through. So imagine feeling that even your body could, now let in. It's become this permeable. That would be a characteristic of the sense of self, which grows from the healthy mirroring. Yeah?
What are the indications that the therapist is experiencing countertransference, and is it ever appropriate to address it in the treatment setting?
Yes, very good question. So let's take a quick look at that. He's asking about countertransference and what to do with it. Of course, I'm so used to working with interns, I always say what to do with it is bring it to your supervisor. And what I do is bring it to Patricia or Judith or, one of my therapist friends and talk about it. So that's what I recommend. I recommend first bringing it to one of your peers who serves as a kind of helpful supervisory voice. And talk together about how to broach it. So he's referring to what's now called the therapist's transference. And signs of this would be, obviously, like, dislike, look forward to the session, or look forward with dread. Wish they would get on with things, judgment, what I call the 5 mindsets that interfere with intimate relationships and with the therapeutic bond. So those would be fear, and I'll describe each one of these in detail, but briefly. Fear, desire, control, judgment, and fantasy. You can check in on yourself regarding countertransference. Is there any way in which the client threatens me? Or do I feel as if I'm afraid of his or her anger? Or I'm afraid of his or her tears? Is there anything about the way the client presents that has a feeling of threat? Am I caught up in fixing this person, the desire to make things all okay? Have I gotten to the point where I do more than half the work? Am I very much focused on how to fix this person? Am I trying to control what this person does or how this person lives his or her life, or control or greatly influence? So let's say control or strongly influence decisions as opposed to remaining neutral. Am I judging this person, especially in a moralistic way? How bad, how wrong? And finally, do I have fantasies about this person, sexual or otherwise? It's never wrong to have a fantasy, but I'm always checking in on my fantasy to ask if it's somehow crossed a line, especially if it's now become obsessive. These would be the 5 central ways in which the countertransference or therapist transference kicks in. And my recommendation is to talk to Judith. Okay. Yeah. Excuse me. I don't want to avoid the other part of the question, although I felt myself drawn to avoiding. So I want to make myself answer his other part, which was, well, do you bring this up with the client? There are a number of answers. Winnicott has responded to this. Irvin Yalom has given what I think is a really good answer. Only bring it up if it's in the best interest of the treatment goals. Not because you're trying to get it off your chest or because you're trying to take care of it. That you should be taken care of with your own supervisor or therapist friend. So I would subscribe to his way of answering. Does this make sense, or did you have something else in mind? Okay, good. Yeah.
The negative part or very positive part of the relationship of the individual to the group of aids.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It could be very helpful to have a proper response from the people around you, but it might be very hurtful to have either indifference or aggressiveness
What is the...
The result of the aggressiveness or lack of interest from the people that are around you or around the individual.
You mean when the therapist has a lack of interest?
No, the person growing up.
Yeah. Oh, the people around you as you're growing up have a lack of interest in you.
Very aggressive or very passive, non-responsive attitude toward the person.
That would be the opposite of the mirroring. And it would, of course, create a kind of black hole, a feeling that you can never get enough mirroring later, the seeking of the delinquent palaces everywhere. That would be the kind of a person who just can't be fulfilled. Because remember that when the feelings were installed through mirroring, with them came the ability to be satisfied. Without the ability to be satisfied with a moderate dose, that is the kind of dose other adults give, then instead you're in the position of never getting enough. That would certainly be an example of the borderline style. Yes? Yeah.
Someone comes in, I'm thinking initially that maybe it carries through with a great deal of anger. How do you empathize with that and mirror it without, exploding it or endangering the individual in their own ego?
Okay, good. Thank you, Jean. Jean's asking about anger. How many people in here feel totally comfortable with other people's anger? So, I guess our first issue is, can we trust anger? So let me make a distinction, which is part of my book on how to be adults in relationships. I think it's really a helpful thing in working with couples, that there's a difference between anger and abuse. So many of us, especially in childhood, met up with abuse rather than true anger. In true anger, the person is expressing a feeling non-violently. When it goes out of control and becomes violating or violent either physically or through invective, put-downs, insults, now it has become abuse. In healthy anger, I express my feeling, whereas in abuse, I demand that you change. Here I'm okay with expressing my displeasure at injustice, dictionary definition, but I'm not demanding that you change. In real anger, I take responsibility for what I'm feeling. In abuse, I blame you. Everybody following so far? In true anger, I see you as somehow implicated in what's going on with me, in the sense that you have triggered something, that's for sure, but when it spills over into abuse, I see you as the cause. So now I'm more likely to hold it against you. And I have a long list, but I'm just giving a few of the examples. That in anger, it's the shortest feeling, and it is let go once it is expressed, whereas in abuse, it is held onto. The Latin word for to feel over and over, this word means over and over, and this word means feel. So it's held onto as smoldering resentment, Whereas here, it just explodes as a flare. And finally, in abuse, you can never stop retaliating, whereas in anger, you let go and move on. You may not forgive, but you do let go. Some of us have never experienced pure anger. We've only been hit with abuse, especially in childhood. So the only answer here is get out of the room. You cross the line, and I can't be talked to that way. If you want to calm down, express your anger in a healthy way, I'm there for you. But if you're going to turn it into abuse and invective and drama, then it's not acceptable. But on this side, you can receive it. So my belief is that if anger were expressed in this healthy way, none of us would be afraid of it. This is what makes us afraid, that it might go this way. And you never know when someone's going to spill over into this side. It's a spiritual practice to learn how to express anger in a healthy way. Why is it spiritual? Because it's an act of love. This is a way of showing real respect for someone. This is disrespect. So in the healthy anger, there would be nothing to fear. Whereas in the unhealthy anger that has become abuse, that's why I don't like the term anger management. You're not really managing. This doesn't need to be managed. This is what needs to be managed. Abuse management. Anyway, here you manage your temper, here you lose your temper. Here you, say what again? Oh, here you manage your temper, and here you lose your temper. And then the other person, in this, the other person is a target. In this one, he's a participant. So I don't think we're really afraid of anger, is my point. I think we're really afraid of the forms in which we've seen it transmogrified into abuse. Jean, did that answer your question? Or say more if you...
Well, it's most likely that someone's going to come in from...
On this right side?
Yeah, from being abused, and they're feeling angry about that. And I guess the empathy could come in and just empathizing with how they have been abused, and then through the course of treatment, turn it around so that they're dealing with it and able to digest it and express it in a different way.
Good. Very well said.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, you're never retaliating, so you're not responding abusively. Yes. Oh, yeah. Yes.
This relationship with your client, and we're making the assumption that transference occurs. Could you say a little bit about the therapist's role in addressing that transference? And is it beneficial to make it? I guess I think in one sense you're always dealing with it, but when would you consider it making it explicit?
Okay. He's asking about responding to the transference when you notice it happening. Obviously, if it's like this, then you welcome it, because this is how people grow. They grow through these phases. Remember that transference is unconscious. You're not doing this in a way that you even notice. But it helps at some point later in the process, or if you think that it helps, it's okay to talk about this. It seems like one of the things that you've always been wanting is to have someone really listen to you. And it sounds like in here that has happened between us. And I, for one, appreciate it. So you don't have to say, you're now engaging in the mirroring transference. But you could put it that way. And I noticed that you look up to me, and I really appreciate that. And I'm always loving to receive that, but I also keep reminding you that you wouldn't idealize me unless you also had it in yourself. I mean, this is what Jung calls the positive shadow, that we admire in others the untapped potential in ourselves. So when you talk about this part of the process, talk about it that way. That, you know, what you're looking up to in me is something you can look into in yourself. You wouldn't have seen it in me if you hadn't already had it in yourself. So I would talk about it that way, as opposed to using these terms. But you certainly would never want to blame somebody for having transference. So let's have one final question, and then we can wind up. Was there one other question? Oh, okay. Anyway, was this helpful? Okay, I hope it all came through, and thank you.